The bar counter stretched like a mahogany river between worlds. On one side, Marcus Rivera nursed a beer he couldn't really afford, his work-worn fingers tracing condensation rings on the polished wood. On the other side of the room, power lunches dissolved into power drinks, designer suits clustered around high-top tables like expensive birds flocking together. Marcus didn't belong here. He knew it. The hostess knew it when she glanced twice at his clean but faded button-down shirt. The bartender knew it when he ordered a domestic beer instead of craft whiskey. But his buddy Carlos had insisted after another 12-hour shift at the construction site. "Come a minute. One drink. You never go anywhere but work and home." So here Marcus sat, shoulders squared despite feeling every eye in the room catalog his calloused hands, his steel-toed boots, the way he held his beer like a man who worked for his money instead of making it work for him. The laughter started low, rippling from a corner booth where 3 men in $1,000 suits leaned over crystal tumblers. Their voices carried that particular brand of confidence that comes from never having to count change. "Look at that guy," one of them said, not bothering to lower his voice. "Bet he's here because he heard about half-price appetizers. Construction worker, maybe? Probably fixes potholes for the city. Single dad for sure. Look at that tired look. Bet his biggest decision is whether to buy name-brand cereal." Marcus felt the familiar burn in his chest. Not anger, exactly, but something deeper. The same feeling he got when other parents at Emma's school looked past him during pickup, when neighbors assumed he was the handyman instead of the homeowner, when the world decided his worth based on the dirt under his fingernails instead of the love in his heart. He didn't turn around. Didn't rise to the bait. Just kept his eyes forward, the way he'd learned to do when Emma asked why mommy left and why daddy cried sometimes when he thought she was sleeping. That's when she appeared. Not dramatically, Victoria Chin didn't do drama. She simply materialized at the bar beside him like she'd been there all along, ordering a scotch neat with the quiet authority of someone who owned boardrooms and bent industries to her will. Marcus glanced sideways. Asian American, maybe 35, wearing a charcoal blazer that probably cost more than his monthly mortgage payment. Her hair fell in a perfect curtain past her shoulders, and when she moved, it was with the precise economy of someone who never wasted motion. She was beautiful, but not in the way magazines taught men to notice. Beautiful like architecture, clean lines, purposeful design, built to last. "Rough crowd tonight," she said without looking at him, her voice carrying just enough volume for the suits in the corner to hear. Marcus almost smiled. Every crowd's rough somewhere. Victoria turned then, studying him with dark eyes that missed nothing. "You don't seem particularly bothered by it. Would it help if I was?" For the first time in months, Victoria Chin Cho of Chin Dynamics, youngest woman ever to grace the cover of Forbes, architect of 3 hostile takeovers and 2 industry revolutions, felt genuinely surprised. She'd noticed him the moment she walked in. Hard not to really. While everyone else in this overpriced meat market was performing their success like a Broadway show, he simply existed. No posturing, no peacocking, just a man drinking a beer with the kind of quiet dignity that made her wonder what story lived behind those tired eyes. The suits were still talking, voices getting louder with each round. "I heard Chin Dynamics is hiring again," one of them said. "Maybe our friend there should apply. I'm sure they need someone to empty the trash cans." Victoria's jaw tightened. She knew those voices, had heard their type in every conference room, every networking event, every space where money talked louder than merit. "Actually," Marcus said, still not turning around, "Chin Dynamics builds sustainable infrastructure. They probably need people who understand how things actually work, not just how they look on paper." The corner went quiet. Victoria raised an eyebrow. "You know my company?" Everyone in construction knows Chin Dynamics. You're the reason we're using recycled materials in half our projects now. Good work. Simple words. No flattery, no agenda. Just recognition from someone who lived in the world her decisions touched. Victoria felt something shift in her chest, a loosening she hadn't experienced in years. And you are Marcus Rivera. He extended a hand. Clean, despite the calluses. Honest. I build things. Victoria Chin. Her handshake matched his, firm, brief, real. I design things that need building. From the corner booth came the scrape of chairs, the rustle of expensive fabric. 3 suits approached with the swagger of men who'd never been told no. Victoria. The lead one, Brad something, junior partner at some firm that lived off family money, spread his arms like they were old friends instead of acquaintances who'd shared exactly 2 conversations. Didn't expect to see you in a place like this. Victoria's expression went glacial. Brad. This is perfect timing. We were just talking about the Riverside Development Project. Maybe you could join us? Give us the benefit of your expertise? His eyes flicked to Marcus dismissively. I'm sure your friend here won't mind if we steal you for a few minutes. Marcus started to stand, not to leave, but to create space. Victoria's hand on his arm stopped him. Actually, she said, voice sharp enough to cut steel, Marcus and I were discussing infrastructure challenges. Something you might find educational. Brad's smile faltered. Infrastructure? Come on, Victoria. Let's talk real business. The Riverside project is worth $200 million. Surely that's more interesting than whatever this is. Marcus took a sip of his beer. Riverside Development. That's the waterfront project by the old marina, right? That's right, Brad said, clearly wondering why the help was talking. Interesting location, Marcus continued. Beautiful views. Prime real estate. Exactly. Brad's confidence returned. Premium condos, luxury retail, the works. It's going to transform that entire area. Marcus nodded slowly. What about the flooding? The question hung in the air like smoke. Flooding? Brad forced a laugh. What flooding? That whole area floods every spring when the river runs high. Has for decades. The old-timers call it the temporary lake. Beautiful for about 6 weeks, then it drains back down. Victoria leaned forward, interested now. You mean seasonal flooding? She asked. More than seasonal, Marcus replied. Any major storm system, really. The drainage infrastructure that was built in the 1940s, never updated. Can't handle modern runoff patterns. Brad waved dismissively. That's why we have engineers. They'll figure it out. Sure, Marcus agreed. But it'll cost you. Flood mitigation, elevated foundations, probably need to relocate the storm drains entirely. Add another 50, 60 million to your budget easy. The silence stretched tight. You seem to know a lot about this, Victoria said quietly. Marcus shrugged. I've worked that area. We rebuilt the marina docks 3 times in 5 years before they finally got smart and moved them upstream. Water doesn't lie, it goes where it wants to go. Brad's face had gone red. Look, I don't know who you think you are, but... He's someone who pays attention, Victoria interrupted, her voice cutting through Brad's bluster like a blade. Unlike people who see dollar signs instead of reality. She turned to Marcus. The city planning records, are they public? Should be. Filed under municipal engineering reports. Might take some digging to find the flood zone classifications, but they're there. Victoria pulled out her phone, fingers flying across the screen. After a moment, she looked up, expression unreadable. He's right, she said quietly. The entire Riverside area is classified as a 100-year floodplain. Has been since 1987. Brad stared at his phone like it had betrayed him. His 2 companions shifted uncomfortably, suddenly finding their drinks fascinating. How did you, Brad started. Research, Victoria said coldly. Maybe you should try it sometime. The three men retreated to their corner booth like wounded animals, their earlier swagger replaced by hushed, urgent whispers. Victoria turned back to Marcus, studying him with new eyes. You just saved them millions of dollars in mistakes, she said. Maybe. Or maybe they'll ignore it and learn the hard way. People usually do. Why didn't you say anything sooner? Marcus met her gaze. Nobody asked. The simple truth of it hit Victoria like a physical blow. How many times had she sat in boardrooms full of expensive educations and designer suits, listening to confident ignorance while the people who actually knew things, the builders, the maintenance crews, the night security guards, stood silent in the corners. Can I buy you another beer? She asked. Marcus glanced at his watch, a battered Timex that had survived more job sites than he could count. I should get going soon. My daughter's got school tomorrow. How old? Emma. His whole face softened when he said her name. She's everything. Victoria felt something twist in her chest. She'd built an empire, commanded boardrooms, made decisions that affected thousands of lives. But the way this man's voice changed when he talked about his daughter, that was a kind of wealth she'd never possessed. Tell me about her, she said. And Marcus did. About Emma's gap-toothed smile and her obsession with butterflies. About the way she insisted on making her own lunch every morning, even though it usually resulted in more peanut butter on the counter than in the sandwich. About bedtime stories and Saturday morning cartoons and the fierce, protective love that had rebuilt his entire world around one small person who called him Daddy. Victoria listened with the same intensity she brought to merger negotiations, but for entirely different reasons. This wasn't information to be leveraged or filed away for future use. This was a window into a life built on foundations she'd never learned to pour, love, sacrifice, presence. She sounds remarkable, Victoria said when Marcus finished. She is. He smiled, then glanced at his watch again. I really do need to get going. He stood, left money for his beer and a generous tip, and started toward the door. Marcus? Victoria called. He turned back. Will you be here tomorrow night? The question surprised them both. Victoria Chin didn't chase anyone, not clients, not deals, not men. But something about Marcus Rivera made her want to break her own rules. Probably not, Marcus said honestly. This isn't really my kind of place. Victoria nodded, trying to hide her disappointment. But, Marcus continued, there's a diner about 10 blocks from here. Murphy's. They make decent coffee and the pie's not terrible. I usually stop there Thursday nights after Emma's soccer practice. What time? 7:30 usually. Maybe 8 if practice runs long. Murphy's Diner. 7:30. If you want, Marcus said. But fair warning, it's not fancy. Victoria smiled, a real smile, not the polished version she wore to board meetings. I think I can handle it. Marcus left, and Victoria sat alone at the bar, staring at her untouched scotch. From the corner booth came the sound of frantic phone calls and damage control, but she barely heard it. For 20 years, she'd built her life around certainty. Market analysis, strategic planning, calculated risks with predictable outcomes. But Marcus Rivera was something new, a variable she couldn't quantify, a question she couldn't research away. She thought about Emma's butterfly obsession and the way Marcus's entire face had transformed when he talked about his daughter. She thought about floodplains and ignored expertise and the quiet confidence of a man who knew things without needing to prove them. By Thursday evening, Victoria had convinced herself 3 times not to go to Murphy's Diner. It was ridiculous. She was Victoria Chin. She didn't chase men to diners for coffee and questionable pie. She had quarterly reports to review, conference calls with Tokyo, an empire to run. But at 7:25, she found herself pulling into the parking lot of a cheerfully shabby diner that looked like it hadn't been updated since the Carter administration. Through the window, she could see him. Marcus sat in a corner booth, still wearing work clothes, jeans and a flannel shirt, boots caked with the honest dirt of another day spent building something real. Across from him sat a small girl with dark curls and her father's serious eyes, animated hands gesturing wildly as she told some elaborate story that made Marcus laugh, really laugh, from somewhere deep in his chest. Victoria sat in her car for a long moment, engine running, watching this glimpse of a life she'd never imagined. The way Emma leaned across the table to steal a bite of Marcus's pie. The way he listened to her 8-year-old wisdom like she was delivering a doctoral thesis. The way they existed together in their own small world, complete and content. She almost left. This felt too intimate, too precious to interrupt. But then Emma looked up and saw her through the window, waved with the fearless friendliness of childhood, and Marcus turned to follow his daughter's gaze. Their eyes met through glass and distance, and Marcus smiled, surprised but genuinely pleased. He gestured toward their booth. Victoria turned off the engine. The diner smelled like coffee and bacon grease and the kind of comfort food that came with vinyl booths and laminated menus. Victoria had eaten in 5-star restaurants around the world, but something about Murphy's felt more real than all of them combined. "Victoria, this is Emma," Marcus said as she approached their table. "Emma, this is my friend Victoria." Emma studied Victoria with the unblinking directness of children who haven't yet learned to hide their thoughts. "You're pretty," Emma announced. "Are you Daddy's girlfriend?" "Emma," Marcus said gently, but Victoria laughed. "Thank you for the compliment. And no, I'm just a friend. Do you want to sit with us? We're having pie. Daddy says the apple pie here is almost as good as the one Grandma Rosa used to make, but nothing's as good as Grandma Rosa's pie because she made it with love." Victoria slid into the booth across from them. Grandma Rosa sounds like a wise woman. She was Daddy's mom, but she's in heaven now with the angels. Daddy says she's probably teaching them all how to make empanadas. Marcus's smile was soft with memory and grief. "She would have liked you, Mija. She always said the best people are the ones who listen more than they talk." Emma nodded solemnly, then brightened. "Do you want to hear about my butterfly project? We're studying metamorphosis in school, and I'm doing my report on monarch butterflies because they migrate thousands of miles, and that's basically like flying from here to space except not quite." Victoria looked to Marcus, who nodded encouragingly. "I'd love to hear about your butterfly project." For the next hour, Victoria listened to Emma explain migration patterns with the passionate expertise of an 8-year-old scientist. She learned about chrysalises and wing scales and the mysterious internal compass that guides monarchs across continents to places they've never been. "It's like they have GPS built into their brains," Emma said, "except it's better than GPS because GPS sometimes tells Daddy to turn left into a lake." "That happened one time," Marcus protested, grinning. "One time too many," Emma replied with devastating 8-year-old logic. Victoria found herself genuinely fascinated, not just by Emma's enthusiasm but by the way Marcus listened to his daughter, never condescending, never hurried, treating her thoughts and questions with the same respect he'd shown Victoria's company the night before. When Emma excused herself to use the bathroom, Victoria and Marcus were alone for the first time since the bar. "She's incredible," Victoria said. "She's the best thing I ever did. The only thing I did right, some days." "I doubt that's true." Marcus stirred his coffee, choosing his words carefully. "Her mother left when Emma was 3. Said she wasn't cut out for the domestic life, needed to find herself. Haven't heard from her since." "I'm sorry." "I'm not. Not anymore. Emma deserves someone who chooses to be here, not someone who stays out of obligation." Victoria thought about her own life, the careful isolation, the walls built from ambition and fear in equal measure. She'd never had to choose between her career and a family because she'd never let anyone get close enough to make it a choice. It must be hard, though, doing it alone. Marcus shrugged. "Everything worth doing is hard. Doesn't make it less worth doing." Emma returned, sliding back into the booth with the boneless grace of childhood. "Victoria, do you have kids?" she asked. "No, I don't. Do you want kids?" "Emma," Marcus warned gently, but Victoria held up a hand. "It's okay." She considered the question seriously, the way Emma's honest curiosity deserved. "I used to think I was too busy for children. Now I wonder if I was just too scared." "Scared of what?" "Scared of not being good enough. Scared of messing up something so important. Emma nodded gravely. Daddy was scared too when it was just me and him. He told me once when I had a bad dream. But he said being scared just means you care a lot. Victoria felt something crack open in her chest, a fault line she didn't know existed. Your daughter is very wise, she told Marcus. Gets it from her grandmother, he replied. Rosa used to say fear is just love with nowhere to go. They talked until the diner started closing, Emma eventually falling asleep against Marcus's shoulder with the trust of a child who's never doubted her safety in the world. I should get her home, Marcus said softly, careful not to wake his daughter. Victoria nodded, though she found herself reluctant to let this evening end. In 3 hours at a vinyl booth in a tired diner, she'd felt more real human connection than in months of networking events and power lunches. As Marcus gently woke Emma and helped her into her coat, Victoria made a decision that surprised her. Marcus, I have a proposition for you. He looked up where, in his experience, propositions from wealthy people rarely worked out well for people like him. My company is bidding on a major infrastructure project. Sustainable housing development, green building practices, the works. We could use someone with your expertise on the ground level. I'm not an engineer, Victoria. I just build things. That's exactly what we need. Someone who builds things. Someone who knows the difference between what looks good on paper and what actually works. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, Emma sleepy and patient in his arms. What would it pay? Victoria named a figure that made Marcus blink. That's a lot of money. It's market rate for expertise. Your expertise. I'd still keep working construction. I'm not giving up my crew. I wouldn't ask you to. We'd work around your schedule. Emma lifted her head from Marcus's shoulder. Daddy, does this mean you'll work with the butterfly lady? Butterfly lady? Victoria asked. You know all about metamorphosis, Emma explained with 8-year-old logic. That makes you a butterfly expert. Victoria laughed, a sound lighter and more genuine than any boardroom had ever heard. I like that title better than CO, she said. 6 months later, the Riverside Project had become the gold standard for sustainable development. The flooding issues Marcus had identified were addressed early, saving millions in potential damage and delays. The construction crews worked with engineers and architects as equals, their practical knowledge valued alongside theoretical expertise. But more than that, Victoria had discovered something she'd never expected to find, a life outside the office that felt like coming home. Thursday nights at Murphy's became a tradition. Sometimes they talked about work, flood mitigation strategies and building codes and the stubborn poetry of making things that lasted. Sometimes they talked about Emma's latest butterfly discoveries or Marcus's memories of his mother's cooking or Victoria's slow learning curve in 8-year-old logic. And sometimes they didn't talk much at all, just sat together in comfortable silence while Emma worked on homework and the diner hummed around them with the quiet contentment of ordinary people living ordinary lives that were, somehow, extraordinary in their simple persistence. The corner booth at Murphy's became their place, not because they claimed it, but because the waitresses started automatically seating them there, because other customers learned to recognize the unlikely family that gathered there weekly, because even the most cynical observers couldn't help but smile at the sight of a CEO helping a third grader with math homework while her father graded quiz sheets from night school classes he'd finally found time to take. Victoria learned to braid hair and appreciate the architectural genius of butterfly wings. Marcus learned that wealth didn't automatically make someone weak or shallow, that success could be built on foundations of genuine merit instead of inherited privilege. Emma learned that families could be made of more than blood, that love could expand to include new people without diminishing what was already there. One evening, as they shared apple pie and coffee that was definitely not as good as Grandma Rosa's but was perfect anyway, Emma looked up from her latest butterfly sketch. Victoria, she said seriously, I think you completed your metamorphosis. What do you mean, sweetheart? You're not scared anymore. You were like a caterpillar hiding in your office cocoon, but now you're here with us. You turned into a butterfly. Victoria felt tears prick her eyes. And what kind of butterfly am I? Emma studied her with artistic concentration. The kind that builds really good nests for other butterflies. The kind that makes sure everyone has safe places to land. Marcus reached across the table and took Victoria's hand, calloused palm against soft skin, 2 different worlds finding their balance point. She's right, he said quietly. You've changed things. Not just the project, not just the company. You've changed how people see each other. Victoria thought about the construction crews who now sat in planning meetings, their voices heard and valued. She thought about junior executives who'd learned to listen before they spoke, to research before they decided. She thought about Brad and his corner booth companions, who still showed up at the bar but with less swagger and more humility. You changed me first, she said. We changed each other, Marcus replied. Emma nodded approvingly. That's what families do. And in a diner that smelled like coffee and belonging, under fluorescent lights that somehow felt warmer than crystal chandeliers, Victoria Chen realized that the most important merger of her career had nothing to do with companies or contracts. It was the merger of 3 hearts that had found their way home to each other, one Thursday night pie at a time. Sometimes the most powerful transformations happen not in boardrooms or corner offices, but in quiet moments over shared pie with people who see your worth before you prove it. Marcus Rivera taught Victoria that expertise comes in many forms, that strength can be gentle, that love builds the most lasting foundations of all. And Emma? Emma taught them both that metamorphosis isn't just for butterflies, it's for anyone brave enough to break out of their cocoon and discover what they were always meant to become. Have you ever been underestimated because of how you look or what you do for work? Have you ever found family in unexpected places, with people who saw your worth when others couldn't? Marcus and Victoria's story reminds us that the most meaningful connections often happen when we least expect them, with people who challenge us to become better versions of ourselves. If this story touched you, leave a comment below and tell us about a time someone saw your potential when nobody else did, or when you discovered that real wealth has nothing to do with bank accounts and everything to do with the people who choose to sit beside you. And if you'd like more stories about finding love, respect, and belonging in unexpected places, hit that subscribe button. Your support helps us share more stories that remind us what really matters in life.